Welcome to September So Fun. We're happy to have you join us today, and I am Charlotte Jokish.
I'm Donna Alexander.
These are the two, we always do two consultants every month, so everything that you see that is sewn by either myself or Donna up here. No little elves come in and do it for us. And this is brought to you by Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and we have 11 stores in the Puget Sound area, and if you have a chance to come in person, look in the book that we send you, or it'll be online on when we do So Fun. We're already doing October So Fun, so look in your either an email or on Facebook, and you'll find out the times that you can go and visit that. Today, the products that are going to be shown will be on the website until October the 7th at this discounted So Fun price, which is 20%, correct? Okay. And you could choose to have your orders shipped or pick up at a local store. And all orders over $100 are shipped for free. And there will be two gifts that we give out, and we're going to have a drawing at the end of the session of our presentation. And during this presentation, if you will go on Facebook Live and you will like or comment, when you do that, you get put into the drawing. And at the end, you may have a chance to win a prize. And they have beautiful prizes. We have beautiful fabrics, a fat quarter, and a jelly roll here for you, and they're just beautiful. And we will announce that at the end. So, are we done?
Yep.
Okay.
We're going to do our notions first. We have 12 notions and tools to help you with today, and Charlotte's going to start off with the first 6.
Okay, so one of the first things that we have here is by Quilt in a Day, and it's called alignment tape. And in this package, this is a very, very cool product. And in this package, there are two sizes. One is a 1/2 inch and one is a 1/4 inch. And it goes on the back side of your ruler, whatever you want to, whenever you're going to cut things. Now, it is removable. It leaves no glue on the back side of your ruler. When you peel it off, throw it away. Don't save it. There's no reason. So if you're making just a 1.5 inch cut here, when I cut a lot of things, I need to have this, because even I have stripology rulers and all those, and I mark where I need to cut, because I can get at the end and find out I haven't cut right. So this keeps you where you're going to keep it correct. And so you can put them on any size that you need. Very, very handy. The next thing is Roxanne's glue stick. This is a basting glue. It comes off, it's washable. It is not permanent. And we're going to show you throughout the seminar how we use this glue. And it's a pretty large stick, and it just twists on the end, and you get more out of the top that way. I usually keep mine in a plastic bag so that it doesn't dry up when I use it. It's easy to do. The next thing we have here is a Creative Grid perfect square, 5-inch square. You can make your own charm. You can make your own charm packets out of this. Also to use it up to square up 1/2 and 1/4 square triangles. Now inside here, inside of all of our rulers, there's instructions. These instructions are there for you to use. They're not just put there just because they like to write up things. What I do with these is I have a folder, and I keep all of the instructions for my rulers. I keep in a folder in a file cabinet. I can pull them out because they're specialty rulers, and you need to know how you used them, because if you haven't used them for a while, you seem to forget there's many uses for these. So don't throw away the instructions that come with these rulers at all. Cool pins. I love these. They are 1 7/8 inch long. They are super fine, and let's get one out here. They are absolutely super fine. I don't know if you can see that. Can we see that? Mm-hmm. They're 1 7/8 inch long, and they have this little end on there that you could pull. This end you're able to iron over it up to 350 degrees, so it's not going to melt. And so you can pull them out, and I like them because they're long and they're thin and they don't buckle your fabric. So, let's see. We're both going to be talking about the hexies, and when Donna suggested that we do hexies, I first told her, no, I'm not going to do those. And then this was the first thing that I got, and I thought, gee, that looked like fun. And I actually did it, and I had a great time doing it. And we're going to show you how to use these paper hexies. You are not going to have to use a ruler. You're not going to have to do any figuring out. There's 100 of these in this little package, and they're reusable. And so we're going to show you, and that's a really cool thing. So those of you who thought, I always said I was never going to make hexies and I was never going to make yo-yos. Well, one thing has worked and the other hasn't. And this was really fun. And when we show you how to use these, you'll think it's fun also.
Okay, the next thing on the list is called the hot ruler, and it's the large, 14 by 4 inches. Maybe some of you have the smaller one. This works great for any kind of hemming that you want to do on a garment, home deck, curtains, anything where you need a consistent straight edge hem. You just fold your fabric over to the line, the depth that you want, and then press right on the top of this with your iron. This stays cool and you can pick it up and move it. In the case of maybe the back of a pillow where you want that straight fold to encase your zipper, then you can use the hot ruler to press that fold down. The 5-inch double curved scissors by Kai are perfect for cutting out applique in the hoop. This curve right here will fit over the hoop on your embroidery machine. And then the curve up keeps you from cutting into the back fabric as you cut that applique out. Now we use these this month on a very modern kind of reverse applique design, and we'll show you these in action in a little bit. Wonder clips, you know how useful these are to do the bindings on your quilts, whether you're going to machine stitch your binding down or hand stitch it. You never can have too many binding clips. In this case, Charlotte suggested we bring in the 20-pack or the 50-pack to help in the construction of these hexies, and we'll show that in just a minute. Pedal stay. I don't know how many pedal contraptions I've gone through, but this one is really great. It comes with a silicone base with these little tiny teeth on the back that helps hold it on carpet or hardwood, plus another little sticky pad or patch that you can put up here that helps also on a hardwood floor. Plus under here is also a piece of Velcro that you put on the pedal, and then the pedal stays right on this sort of velvety Velcro receiving fabric. So pedal stay, I've already used mine, and I didn't use the Velcro yet, but I do need to get this all stationary on my carpet. Charlotte brought us some table runners in the May program, and she used Pellon 987 fusible fleece. And there were so many questions about how it worked and what the loft was like. We brought in a small package for you to try, 22 inches by 36. And it's fusible on one side, and so you fuse that one side to your pieced quilt, and then on the back side you use 505 spray. And it makes such a solid sandwich that your quilting is really easily done. I like the way the fusible holds all of those raw edges and pieced squares kind of straight for quilting on my domestic. And then finally, we have this month Wonder Fuse by Clover. And this is an 18-inch by 3-yard package of paper-backed fusible. And Charlotte's going to show you a little sample of how this works, and then we're going to go over it in more detail when we do our applique project of the month. So
I have one more thing to say about this pedal stay. My husband saw it and he said, "Have you been keeping something from me?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." He's an amateur radio operator, and so he has a microphone and he has a foot pedal. And he said, "I could really use one of those." And so I said, gee, I have one in my sewing room. And he goes, have you been hiding it from me? And so I gave it to him to use. And so his pedal for his microphone sits right on this. So it's not just for sewing machines, ladies. It's a great product. So what are we doing? What's our first? Are we doing this one now? Okay, so we're going to start with some of our things here. Our first book is Charming Jelly Roll Quilts, and there are 8 creative quilts in here. They either use 2.5-inch strips or 5-inch charm squares. And I decided to do, well, we each did 2 out of this book. Donna made 2 big quilts, and I decided to make 1 mini and 1 full size. And my mini is right up here, and this was with a Moda charm square pack. And this is pretty small pieces in here. And on the corner here, where is it? Donna, what did I do with it? Wait a minute. Did I move it? Oh no, it's in here, the book. Okay. And on the corners in here, this is the actual block, and it's not very big. And you can see that we have to put a little square in here and cut it in half. On our website, this is not in our products on the page today. It's going to be in our website. I use the folded corner clipper ruler to do this. And how I did that, Carrie, I could. So you're going to lay this ruler, let me do it right here. You're going to lay it. Can you see that, Carrie? Okay. So when you put this on here, and then you're going to mark it right here, and then 1/4 inch away, which I usually use a scant 1/4 inch, and a scant 1/4 inch is 1 needle click to the left. So you want to go a little bit beyond that, a little bit smaller than 1/4 inch. And then when I cut that across there, what happens is that when I fold it, I get a perfect folded corner. And there's very, very little to have to trim up to make that square, because anytime you're going to do any quilting, you need to square up each block as you make it. Because if you don't, by the time you get finished, you know, with every round, you need to square it up because you want your quilt to be even and square at the end. But this is a great tool, and I used to always have trouble getting these exactly the way that I needed them sewn, and you end up with no dog ears on the corners. So you have it shows you exactly where to sew that along that line. So that's that quilt. And the other one that I did here is called, now both of these quilts can be made in either size. Any of these quilts can. This was made from Kimberbell jelly roll that I had left over from another project. And it's this way and that way. And it's going to go to a child, and so I thought that the quilt was actually too big for the child. So all the extra blocks that I did, I put them on the back. And so I had no leftovers. Now, with leftover blocks, you can go ahead and make pillow shams if you wanted to. I didn't think about that. But that was easy to do. I quilted it on my quilter with King Tut thread and put Warm and Natural inside that. Donna's going to show you hers.
Okay, the first one I did was called Needle Sharp, and it's these great big giant propellers. The basic block is 18 inches square, and this quilt calls for 12 blocks. Well, once I got 9 of them done, I realized that the designer of these quilts, what was his name? Scott Flanagan.
Oh yeah, they're pretty big.
He's thinking really big. So this is 9 blocks. It could have been 12. You're heading in on a queen size, or if you added more blocks, you could really do a king size quilt in nothing flat. It's just a series of jelly roll strips sewn together in what we call stratas, and then a triangle piece of background fabric flipped over one corner. And then you just turn them 1/4 turn and sew them together. Now my fabric is a jelly roll that features bees. My favorite is this one here that says Queen Bee. And then there's other little bee related fabrics and some chicken wire background. And then finally, for these triangles and the outer border, I picked out shades of honey right here from the fabric in the Tukwila store. The leftover 2.5-inch jelly roll strips that I didn't use in the body, I made the binding out of. And I tried something different. This is a 108-inch grunge polka dot that I had used on another quilt. And I just had pieces left. So I tried this instead. I pieced it together around a panel. Now, how many of you don't have too many panels in your collection? And so now I have one less. But it's kind of a nice surprise. You don't expect anything like that on the back. And the theme goes right along with the front. Now, I had this sent out to my long arm quilter, and she did this charming edge-to-edge bumblebee quilt design. So this was really fun, even though I made a mistake on it. We won't talk about that today. And then the second quilt is called Pirouette. And it's considered a partial seam quilt. And what that means is you stitch your jelly roll with 2 background strips, and you just make hundreds of those, it seemed like. And then you cut out your little centers. And the first stitching you're going to do is this strip to a partial seam to that center. And then that gives you a long length to stitch the second strip, the third strip, and the fourth strip. Now this is open, and you come back and you finish that partial seam. Really easy on this size block. Partial seams are not anything to worry about as long as you follow the directions, which of course you know I don't do very often, but I did on this one. This features Pout Fish fabric, which is my grandson's one of his favorite books. And so I was kind of struggling to find more fabric after I bought the jelly roll. So I had to order some yardage off the internet. And then I found a panel that I fussy cut these letters. These characters are very recognizable from this series of children's books. And then finally, I wanted to put my grandson's nickname in the border. So my long arm quilter, besides doing this wonderful edge-to-edge fish pattern, had her husband stitch on both borders, Hank the Tank. So this is going to baby Henry for his 2nd birthday. Okay, what's next?
I think we're doing gather pumpkins.
Okay,
So
let's wander over here.
do we have the,
I'll start, and
Here.
you
Donna, we need this.
Here is Gather Pumpkins, which is our applique this month. And if you're not familiar with applique, I'm going to do a little step-by-step construction on this. Mine is featuring this sort of fun ghost fabric, a ghost pumpkin, which is real popular now out at the markets. And when you buy this pattern, you get 2 designs. You get the forward-facing design if you have a scan and cut, and you get the reverse if you're going to cut it yourself. So this is mine, and I have not quilted the background because I have a little bit of texture in that fabric, but I have added 3 more leaves because for me, more is better. So, and there's Charlotte's.
Do you want to do your?
I can.
Go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to me.
So this was the pattern that I looked at with Charlotte that day, and I said, I'm not doing this, which we do, and then we give in and we do it. And I'll tell you what, it's so easy. So you get a guide that shows you all the numbers of all the pieces you're going to cut out. And then you get the pieces, and this is what was so overwhelming to me. I said, I don't have time to figure that out. Well, you know, if you just turn off the TV and read it once, things start to make sense. So you get all those shapes cut out. You see mine has the gather backwards because I was going to hand cut this. I don't have a scan and cut. And then you get the full-size pieced shape that you're going to place underneath a Teflon sheet, and you're going to start your construction. And so my first piece that goes down is this one, and that is 4C. 4D goes on top. B will fit over here. E, be sure and mark all of these on the back of your paper, and so on. So I haven't finished cutting the rest of these. So these will fit in, and then finally the stem goes on. Now what you end up getting, once you get that placed just right, you put another Teflon sheet over the top, over your design, and you do a 2 to 3 minute press, and all of a sudden you've got one full pumpkin to place on your background, instead of piecing it one by one on the background fabric with no design to follow. So when I get done today, I'll go home, I'll finish cutting all of these ghost pumpkin pieces and place that on a new background and make a second one of these. So.
Now, the way that I made mine, whoops, there's a big step there. My gather is, I do things, I did the same thing that Donna does, and you put it on your Teflon sheet and press it. And that's one of the coolest things. When you first, you know, when I first did applique, that was really fun to see that you could put all those pieces together, pick it up, and it goes right onto your fabric. And I do have a scan and cut, so I can use that, which is fun to do. And one of the things, the way that I sewed mine on the machine, I've talked a lot about using a stitch Bible. And once you get a brand new machine or any machine, if you'll go through and do all of your stitches into the default stitch length, and you have it in a book, and you look at the stitches, because you know we have those wonderful screens on our sewing machines, but they don't always give the stitches the exact look that you want. And so I knew that I wanted to do a real small blanket stitch on my gather, and I used Quilter Select thread, which is a finer thread to do that quilting. And when I do any applique that I'm using a light color here, my background is going to be black. I did not choose black bobbin to use in the back. Now the reason, you'll see all the colors that I use to sew my pumpkins together. Now the reason that I use the same color bobbin is that if just in case your tension's off just a tad, you're not going to see that black come through. So if I had done that to this fine stitch up here, some of that black could have come through. So that's how I do that. Now down here, I use King Tut thread, which is a 40 weight thread, and I used another blanket stitch, and it made it stick out a little bit more. I used a triple stitch in my stems here, and in my leaves, I put a triple stitch in here, and this is all with King Tut thread, and it's really fun to do. And then I did quilt it, just for emotion it into my quilt, but you can see how I do that on the back. And all I used was regular thread in the bobbins. It doesn't matter what's in there, but all I wanted to do is make sure to use the same color on the back that I used on the front, and then you get perfect stitches. I'm going to talk a little bit about fusing and the fusible that we brought in. Fusibles are really fun to use, but they can be very aggravating also. And if they have instructions in them, and we need to read the instructions, because there's little men in white coats that decide what glue. This is glue that's going to go on the back side of this that makes it adhere. Well, it either is going to use steam or it's going to be a dry iron. This particular one that we brought in, our Wonder Fuse, it's one side is paper, as Donna told you, and you're going to use a hot, dry iron. Dry means that that glue does not want any moisture. If you use moisture, that glue will not adhere correctly. When you've put your fusibles down, let it sit there until it's cool. Don't start trying to pull the paper off when it's hot. When you do, you'll see some of the glue come off. Well, one of the things is you haven't fused it well enough. So what I did, and on this particular fusible, they asked you to put a press cloth over, so you could put a press cloth on the top of here before you press it down onto your fabric. And so in here, Carrie's going to get real close. I did this so that you could see how perfect that your glue should, when your paper comes off, your fabric should look like this. It should go into the fabric and not stay on it. If you start pulling the paper off and some of that glue comes off, you have not fused it well enough. And then go ahead and fuse it again. Don't, stop pulling the paper off. And then fuse it again, let it get cold, and then pull it off. That is a good rule for any fusibles. You must let them sit to get cold. If you don't, you're not going to get good adhesions, but also what's going to happen is you can find bubbles in your fabric because the glue has not, when you pick it up and the glue is hot, it moves, and so that'll cause bubbles. So you want to make sure that you leave it cold and then pick it up. Yeah. So what are we doing
Hey,
now?
Donna, quick question for you. Somebody wanted to know, what scissors did you use to cut around your applique since you hand cut yours out?
These I used a really sharp Tula Pink scissor that I got from So Fun maybe in May. We featured it. Yeah. What you want is a really sharp, very pointed, smaller scissor. So I would recommend a Kai scissor, but don't try and use a big shear.
Don't you think even the ones we brought in would work really good because they're curved?
Maybe the curved Kai that we brought in this month, but that sharp point is going to give you these tiny little curves. And the one thing I forgot to mention is Charlotte did the blanket stitch. I just did a straight stitch with monofilament just to tack that raw edge down lightly, and it just disappears. It's almost invisible. So let me show you. Charlotte, do you want to grab that other scissor?
So Donna's asking Donna, should the tip be curved on the scissors?
It could be, because if curved, the reason you could use a curved scissor that we actually brought in this time is that when you cut around, the point isn't going to go into the fabric here. You're able to just cut right along here, and this is sharp enough at the point that you can get into these little corners that these little crevices that Donna's talking about. Like, this is real small in here. Very, very small. And this is good. Now, these are the Tula Pinks that we have brought in before.
I think these were a May.
I think we did. We
did these in May, and you can see that they have sculpted the tip, and that makes it really easy to puncture through the fabric and the paper to get your first cut started. And even these are something that my son bought me. My standard Christmas gift is scissors.
Good.
But as long as they're still really pointed and really sharp, they'll give you a good edge on that fusible.
Yep. So,
okay, let's look at what we're moving on to.
What are we doing next?
That brings us to the Hexi pillow. Do you want to go ahead?
No, you can go ahead, and then I'll do mine. We don't care.
Okay, I tried to follow the instructions, which I know is a shocker. You construct all of these hexes on the cardboard template, and thanks to Charlotte, it was so easy to just fold that fabric over the cardboard template and then put these little clips on. So 2.5-inch square, here. And you just start folding and clipping and folding and clipping until you get them all completely covered. Then, where'd mine go?
Is it under there?
Nope, it's got a thread attached to it.
Oh, it's on the floor.
Thank you, Carrie, for, it must have stuck to me somehow.
It's got
So this is the one that I've been working on throughout my travels. And I used Quilter Select 80 weight bobbin thread. You're going to watch me try and thread this needle on camera, right?
You share your glasses.
And the scissors are...
Let me go get them.
Thank goodness for glasses.
Yeah. Okay, here. There's scissors right there.
There, I did it.
Okay.
80 weight bobbin thread, because all you need is for it to just hang on lightly, but I'm not going to remove this thread like the directions said. So you're just going to stitch at each one of those pleats. And this is something that I just did in front of the TV. You can make one of these, like one of these a minute, and still watch the subtitles on some kind of foreign film. 3 little stitches, tighten it up, and then move on to the next pleat. And then knot it off at the end. Now that was her instructions to complete all these hexes. You trim it and take the paper out, and then she has you take a finished hexie, arrange your design, and then put glue all the way around the outer edge. And so I did that. It seems like a lot of glue, and it's sort of labor intensive. Plus I was worried that perhaps the glue would kind of ooze out into these little ditches. So you get the arrangement in here, 1/4 inch ditch, and you start stitching across the corners of the hexie, through the ditches, and then you come back and you repeat. So I did do that on my pillow and decided I needed to come up with a little bit different method. Here are my leftover hexes on the back with my zipper. And these are just edge stitched, because you don't want to go any hexie to go to waste. So this is my method of doing a hexie now. I have the hexie, this pretty Christmas fabric. I have the hexie all stitched in there about 1/4 inch from the edge. I come along, I trim it. You get rid of that bulk. And I'm trying not to cut through the thread, but if you do, those little corner knots are going to hold it. You finish with that, and at this point I press it once, get a good press on those side seams, and then you open up 2 corners, you slip it out, and there's your finished hexie. But it still needs some kind of protection, because I'm not going to glue all the way around those. So I take the finished hexie, I've drawn myself a smaller hexagon template. I've traced out fusible interfacing. This happens to be Pellon Shapeflex 101. And it just fits right over the top. And I press it. All the raw edges are covered. All the threads covered. It is now protected so that all it needs is a dot of glue, and then you can put it in a different arrangement or the same arrangement that she's made. This one happens to not have the ditches, but has these little triangles that show. And now they're free floating because they're protected with that fusible underneath. So it's more of a three-dimensional project. There you can see my fusible back there. So they're all, quote unquote, loose, except for the thread that travels through them. So that was my change in the hexagon pattern.
So how I did my hexies, you guys, most of people that know me know I do not care for hand sewing. I can hand sew, but that's not my forte. Donna does great hand sewing. So I used, here's my hexie here, and this is my 2.5-inch square. I had many 2.5-inch squares left over. I'm going to take my basting glue and I'm going to put it around this hexie all the way around it. And then I am going to use, just as Donna said, you're going to start folding over. I'm going to keep it down with my clips all the way around till I get all the way around it and it's all done. The glue is going to help keep that down. Put another clip here, and this is where you want these mini clips. Mini clips come in very, very handy for many, many things. Now, when I get all the way around this hexie, I didn't trim any of the insides of my hexies at all. When I get all the way around, I'm going to take a hot iron because I want the glue to dry and I want a real nice crisp edge here. And I let it dry, and then I do the exact same thing after I made a whole bunch of them and take off two sides, and I was able to pull the paper out. These papers are reusable. And I just did the glue, and then I did do, I kind of followed directions on my pillow a little bit. And I'm like Donna, she had made these before, hexies, and this is the first time I made them. I will go back and sew across here. I started using the glue that the lady had said to use, to hold these hexies down. And it's a little stiff, and I didn't really care for it. And Donna's way of putting some fusible on the back is just perfect for that. But I'm going to go back, and I'm going to sew across this way. So all of my corners on my hexies are sewn down, and it's going to be just like her item right here. And it's not going to matter if they're up, if you have a place in here to put. And then what I did with this pillow and what I used in this pillow, we brought in the we brought in the Pellon's 987 fusible fleece batting. I fused that to the back side of my front of my pillow, and I fuse it to the back side of my pillow. And then I do and this is on our website, and one of our So Fun Facebook Lives is an invisible zipper in the seam, and I show on one of those, well, I think it was May that I did it, and it's going to show you exactly how to put in that invisible zipper into this pillow. But it was fun to do, and the thing is, if you're making this, there's several ways in the pattern that she has you, arrange your hexies. And I did this, I did not measure in between. I just kind of put them down and sewed down. But I would definitely go back and sew all 8 corners because they need to be sewn down.
And we've got it. Yeah. That's the pattern that is available this month, along with the 100-pack hexie template.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so what are we doing now?
Do you want to do your jacket?
Oh, okay.
This is the Swing Style Sensations jacket, and there's so many options with this month. It's got 2 collar styles, 3 sleeve styles, and 3 lengths, including the short jacket, the short coat, and then it's hard to see, but the little white thing in the corner looks like a bathrobe. That's really the long coat. And so the options of putting these different styles together are just endless. So
I made the one without the collar, and this is rayon batik. And I made it a little bit bigger than it should have been at first, and it was way too big for me. The pattern is generous, and I forget the sizes are. Let me see, what are the sizes? Donna, what do we have here? Where are the sizes?
they are,
I think I had the same feeling about that. If you guys need a robe pattern, this is great for a robe because there's a long robe. It looks great. I think it goes to 22.
8 to 28.
Oh, 8 to 28. So this is very generous. I did take in my sleeves, and yes, I honestly did hand sew my sleeves. I did some hand sewing on it, and I had to cut mine down. It was way too big, and it was also, when I put it on, it looked like I had a train behind me because I'm relatively short, and so I cut that a little bit off. Now, because this does not have any collar whatsoever, this is like 4 pieces. It sews up really quickly. I did mine all on the serger, and then what I did I did a rolled hem, and I could not find any purple woolly nylon, and so at our store I just got some navy blue because there's some blue in this fabric. But now, one thing about rayon batiks or rayon, when you get in the car, don't put this on and wear it in the car, because you put your seatbelt over it and it looks like you slept in it. You might want to not do that. I learned that the hard way. But this is a real simple pattern. It makes up easy, and it's very, very generous. And Donna made hers with you made a collar and a collarless one.
Yes, I made 2. So the first one I made, I always start with the pattern a little bit too big out of fabric that I don't, I'm not too attached to. So this is a real narrow wale corduroy. The pattern is designed to use a fabric that's beautiful on both sides. This, however, is not. So this one calls for the shawl collar to finish that edge. But you can finish all the edges if you want to on the serger. That is one of the features of this pattern. So here is my cuffed 3/4 sleeve, or you can leave it straight. You can have them long, faced, hemmed, however you wish to do your sleeves. And then Charlotte, I'm sure, has a serger that works and likes her. Mine doesn't work and hates me. So I opted to do what's considered a Hong Kong finish, which is just a binding over my raw edges, and you can see the contrast there between the fabric and the binding. Now this is the longer coat style, longer coat, and it's too big for me. I started with an 18, and it's way too generous through the bust area, so I retooled my pattern, and then I came up with some fabric that looks nice on either side. This is black wool, and I did basically what's considered the collarless version, which, like Charlotte's, we've just turned under slightly to create that little lapel. It's a high-low pattern, and I don't mind. I even lengthened this because of my height. But the question then is, how do I finish my seams? So for years, I have, thanks to the old Jansen fabric outlet, I have known that you can make really nice binding out of swimsuit or performance spandex. So I found this remnant at the fabric store. It's a nylon spandex performance with a foil on the top. A foil finish gives it that shimmer. And I used half of that remnant to cut 1.25 inch strips that I applied just like quilt binding. So I sewed right sides together, flipped it over, and then came back and stitched in the ditch. And then with a really sharp pair of scissors, I have cut that binding close to the stitching. So at a glance, it looks like it's bound equally on either side. I've done that on the front, just a basic quilt binding turn, and then finished up the hem and the long sleeves. And so this is kind of my ode to a tuxedo with no place to go. The one thing I will mention about the inside is I bound the inside seams too, but I just took that performance Lycra or spandex and reversed it so it has that matte finish and it doesn't scream glitter on your inside seams. So very versatile. You can make all kinds of great binding out of a spandex type fabric with great results. So
And the spandex legs that go around the edge.
Yes.
Curved edge, real nice.
yeah, it stretches really nice. You don't have to do any kind of bias cutting or anything like that. So
Very, very, very simple jacket. Very, very easy to make. Very-
absolutely.
Yeah, and very fun. So we are going to go, Donna, you get to,
We must be at the,
yeah, where's our,
I don't know,
I saw it.
the swirl.
Yeah,
It was up here.
there it is.
The next pattern is called Swirl Sensations. And I saw a sample of this in a local quilt store and thought it was such a wonderful idea to use as an art project instead of everything having to boil down to 2 pieces of fabric and batting to make a quilt. You can only really make so many quilts and tabletops to give as gifts. And then you have to look for a different creative resource. So that's what I brought in. And basically, we'll come over here. This was my end result. This consists of 3 layers of batik. Batik is essential because it's so tightly woven that when you start cutting, you aren't going to have a lot of unraveling as you would in a regular sewing cotton. So this is an 18-inch square with 3 layers, and I stitched them up, sliced them in quarters, and then mixed them up. So this one was part of this, and part of that when I did the original stitching. Once you cut it up, you get it all arranged, and you place it on a 4th piece of batik. Batik because you're going to see the back of it, and you see some of it peeking through these intersections. So let me show you how I started on this green. This is a good way to get rid of maybe some batiks that you're not so truly fond of. This is an old batik, and the ones that they have today are much more beautiful. So that was the back layer. This is the 2nd layer. And of course, this is the top. And what I've got in the machine right now is the sister block to this green in the red. And here's my layers, kind of a marbled mauve. And then this one is kind of a rusty, nothing exciting. And then this more solid red. And through my travels for Sew Fun this month, I've sewn and sewn and sewn in a circle. And that's what I'm going to show you today. There's nothing you can do wrong with this. The most important thing is that you cross over all of these circles to provide spaces to cut away 1 or 2 layers. So I thought I was going to burn my machine up. Cross over. You really can't put too much thread on this. And I'm not a free motion quilter, so this was like liberating to just go willy-nilly. So this is a 12-inch block, and I had a 12-inch block in the green, and you can see how I'm starting to cut this away. This is the center fabric. This is the third layer. And I've even cut a chunk out of that, which doesn't matter because your fourth layer of batik is going to cover that right up. You can't make a mistake. So this is the scissor that we brought in this month, and you just poke it in one of those side openings, lay it horizontal to the fabric, and see how that point gets right in there, and it reveals that second layer of fabric. Or in this case, I cut down to the third layer. And when I get done with all of those, I'm going to put them back together for just a fun, funky kind of art piece. With the fourth layer of fabric, you get all of your squares mixed up and arranged in a pleasing design. Pin it on your background, and the last thing you do is you add a layer of tulle netting. You go to the machine and you do a few circles through the tulle, maybe in the areas that don't have a lot of stitching, and you secure that tulle across the surface, and you're done. Now the pattern tells you you can come along and just bind the raw edge as if it was a quilt. I decided to put the smaller purple border on, and then I went to hang it in my spare bedroom, and I thought, wow, that would make a great darkening shade over my window. So that's where I had to expand the border, and then did just a little bit of freeform quilting on that extra wide border. And when you hang this up on a window, it turns to stained glass because you've got just 2 layers of fabric here, 3 here, and 4 here. So you get a lot of play from the light that's coming in behind it. And then finally, after I used up the 18-inch fat quarters, I used the leftover strips to bind it. So it really reduced a lot of fabric in my stash that I didn't really know if I wanted to use it because some of the pieces were not as attractive as I thought they were years ago when I bought it. So
one of the things that we talked about, and Donna and I talked about, when I started cutting mine, I did some samples, and when I started cutting mine, I cut out thicker pieces of fabric, and it is much nicer to cut out the slender pieces that she cut out, very small, so you're not cutting out that much of the fabric. So if you have a wider strip, just go to the very narrow ones, and that's what really makes it really attractive. Mine were pretty ugly, to be honest. But, okay, so Donna, what are we doing? We're going to do, Table-tastic.
yep, the last book.
The last book we have here is our Table-tastic book by Doug Lako. Mm-hmm. And this is Table-tastic 2. And there are 20 patterns in here. And when you open the first page of this book, he tells you on the very first page, everything that is in this book it shows you. So there are 20 patterns, and here are the patterns. And so you can go to the page, whatever is one that you're going to use. And so I did this one. But the cool thing about this is on page 13. And he always puts 2 colorways in here. So you have already a choice of colors, and see how different that each one of these look like. So when I did this particular pattern, I had this black fabric for forever, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And I live on the other side of the mountains here, and my closest store to get fabric is about 40 miles away. And our Ace Hardware has some fabric, and they carry some Maywood fabric. Somebody said, well, I'll go to your Ace Hardware store. So they actually had some Maywood fabrics that match this black in here. And this is made to the size that is in the book. And all I did for my stitching is I just put my guide, the little metal guide that you can put behind the foot of your sewing machine, and I put it to the size that I wanted, and I just sewed with Quilter Select 60 weight thread. So it's very fine thread, but I just made just real simple quilting designs in it. And I used, in all of my table runners, I use 987 Pellon that we talked about. So in here, this makes a real fine, nice table runner that you can set a Coke on, or you can set, you know, a kid's glass of milk, and it's not going to turn over. If you use a heavier batting, sometimes it makes it a little too wobbly for that. The second one that I made in here is on this page, and it's called Manchester. And so we have two colorways here. And I just went into my resource center. Now I made this exactly the way that the pattern tells you to. I did not put any borders on it. Donna's going to show you how she used borders on hers to add to it. This is exactly to the length of the pattern. So if you have a small table, you can make this as long as you want. But I did it exactly to this, and this happens to be 4th of July fabric. Now, how I quilted this is I use edge-to-edge stitching in my Brother sewing machine and mapped out where I wanted it, and it is all, I don't know if you can see it, it's got stars all the way over it, and it's done with King Tut thread, red thread. And I also used the 987 Pellon in this one. Now the third one that I did is the Christmas fabric here, and let me get where that is.
While you find that real quick, Donna, a question came in about the tool on your quilt over here. So how does it hold up to washing? If you add that tool to it, can you wash it?
That is a really good question. I don't know. It's an art quilt, and I would say for the most part, you're not going to wash it. Maybe after a few years it gets dusty, and you would put it in the dryer and maybe shake some of that loose. But I would not make this to go on a couch or on your lap or a bedspread. It's strictly a wall hanging art piece. And anybody who has done any bridal work probably knows if tulle will wash. I mean,
It probably will. However,
you're going to put some abrasion on those raw edges.
Yeah.
So just expect that, but I would try and avoid it.
I think it's kind of like, I think it would be kind of like having a wall hanging. Most of our wall hangings we're not going to wash. You know, I mean, they are going to be on the wall. Yeah, they're going to get dusty, but most of our wall hangings we're not going to leave there forever. So, you know, you take them down periodically. And I don't even know if you could relatively do that with dry cleaning. I just don't know.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
don't either.
because you would, you know, you're thinking about tulle. If you're using tulle as bridal, you're going to have that dry cleaned. You're not going to ever wash it. So that's, you know, that's a question. We don't have the answer.
I'm pretty sure you can wash tulle because
Right.
it's nylon.
It's
right?
nylon, yeah.
But the abrasion that you put to those cut edges
Right.
is going to be more the factor than the washability of the tulle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so the third table runner that I made here, these were all leftover fabrics from other Christmas fabrics that I had. And this is on page, he shows you one in Christmas fabrics and then one in just a regular fabric here. Now, what I did on this particular one, all of the quilting, I did edge to edge on my Brother. And this is the back. These are what I did. Now, all of this stitching on here, because there's a lot of gold, I use King Star, which we sell in the store and will be on our website, metallic thread. Metallic thread has a core, and the metal is wrapped around that. And so that is metal. And now you're going to put it into your sewing machine, and it's going to go through the eye of the needle. We highly recommend, they used to be called Inspira needles. They're now called Foth and Viking needles. I used a 14, which is a 90, and it was the embroidery needle that was in my machine. And I noticed I used a lot of metallics in some other projects, the last project that we're going to show you here. And I noticed I never had a break one in it, and then all of a sudden my thread started to break. And I analyzed something because I was told by somebody in our service department that if you use a lot of metallics and a lot of monofilament threads, they know when they open your machine that you use that. I'm not sure how they know that, but they do. And so I started to make my brain think, why is it breaking now when it hasn't broken? And there's friction that thread is coming through, and it's metal against metal. And I thought, I've just worn a groove in the top of my eye of my needle. As soon as I changed my needle, I didn't have it break again at once. So if you're using metallic threads, and I didn't slow down the machine, I used Yemnet and I also used King Tut, and they're beautiful threads, and normally they do not break. So one of the things that I had to think about this is when I got my first machine that had a bobbin that you could wind through, you could wind your bobbin through the needle. When the thread went up to the bobbin, it actually wore a groove in the plastic. Now all of the machines have a thin piece of metal that goes across there because thread will cut. So if you're having troubles with it, change your needles, and they were all a 14 with that. And this was done to the exact size. Now this is a simple pattern and can be made so many ways. So you have 3 blocks in it, that's all there is, and then a piece, a single piece that goes across here. And I made that exactly to the size that it said. But you could, if you have a longer table or a shorter table, you can make it any size you want. Well, that's, Donna, you? Okay. I think I did 3, yeah.
So the first runner I did is called Norwood. And this quilt designer loves to name all of his quilts for British names. So you saw Charlotte's Manchester. I have one up here too. But this is Norwood, and the 2 colorways. And mine is done in jewel tones. But what I liked so much about it was this 45-degree corner cut on the opposite ends. I did put a border on it. I do not like to bind right on the design. He has, I believe it's 1 1/4 inch strips, and if I had bound my 3/8 of an inch with the magic binding, this background would just disappear. So I typically always put a border on. And then I just did some simple straight line, curvy line quilting on the back, and then finished it with the magic binding, and then this little flange is this background fabric. The second one I did was Manchester, which is also the one Charlotte did. And like she said, hers is the size that the book recommends. Mine is larger. I not only put more strips in the length, but I added the border around the outside edge. Now, I do want to show you a couple of things. This is the first one I did, which I consider a total failure. It's too busy. I love this striped fabric, but it doesn't belong in this triangle. And then I didn't like the accompanying fabrics. So I've just put this off to the side. The one thing I do want to mention about the ruler that we talked about earlier is one thing you can do is create these triangles and make sure that the direction that you've cut them out is consistent. If you had cut out a square and laid on here, you would have to twist and turn and think ahead, how is this going to fold over and what direction is it going to go? But if you measure this area here and just cut out the triangle directionally, then you get them consistent every time. And I did that also here. That little tiny pattern is running horizontally on all of those squares.
So Donna, a question came in, what is magic binding? And I believe, didn't you in an earlier So Fun do a demonstration for that?
I did do a demonstration. Magic binding is a 2-color binding. The outer strip that shows is 1.5 inches. The flange is 1 3/4 inches, which is kind of counterintuitive. But once the long strips are sewn together and folded and applied from the back to the front, then you can just stitch in the ditch and you get that little tiny piping effect that breaks up your binding from your border. Now, at one time I had an instructional sheet. I don't know if it got loaded onto our website.
I'll look for the link for the video and stuff, and I will add that in to the person who asked the question in this video. So
Okay.
Stay tuned. It may take a little bit of time after we're done live, but we will find those links and post them for you so you can figure out how to do the magic binding.
It's my way. I like to finish my quilts by hand. But if I'm in a hurry, because we produce a lot of different quilting projects for our trunk shows, if I'm in a hurry, then I'll use magic binding because I know I can put it on by machine. So finally is called Eden Park, and it's sort of a churn dash shape. It doesn't have the cut off triangles in the corners, but that's what it reminded me of. There's the 2 colorways. And then this is my finished runner, much bigger than what the book calls for. This fussy cut center block is Valentine fabric, but I thought that the typewriters were so charming, reminded me of the old electric typewriter that I got as a graduation present from high school in another century. And then I found the key fabric on another trip to the same store, and it just happened to go perfectly color-wise. I don't know if it's part of the same group. And then this little hexagon background green. And then the black border and some edge stitching for quilting. And I did use the 987 fusible Pellon on this, and I loved the way it just really snugged up all of these seams and tamped down all the frayed edges. You know, your raw edges do a lot of fraying as you handle your quilts. And once that Pellon was pressed to the face of this table runner, it just sort of alleviated a lot of worries about how small these pieces were and shifting and raw edges, and it just went together super fast. So I'm a true believer in Charlotte's 987 now in certain projects. So those are my 3, and Charlotte has a demo.
I have a demo here. Carrie will get over here. We have a nice, we talked about this double square up ruler by Quilt in a Day. I think you can see it better this way, Carrie. Can you see the lines on that pretty good? Okay, so there's your square up, 6.5-inch square up ruler right here. And this is a great way to square up your half square triangles. Now, one day a lady from our Sew Fund, members came in and she said, I'm new to sewing. And she said, I made my first quilt and I'm really kind of upset the way it turned out. And the first question I asked her, because I wasn't a quilter for many years. I was a garment sewer, I was industry, did draperies, did upholstery work. Quilting is totally different. We have 1/4-inch seams and scant 1/4-inch seams, and everything is different. And one of the things that I learned, and I asked her, I said, now, did you square up your each round of your block as you went? And she said, no. And so the most important thing when you're quilting, besides your seam allowance, is to make sure that every time you're making a block, every round that you put on it, say you're doing a log cabin, every time you go around that in a log cabin, you're going to square that up. When you do that, by the time you have an 8.5 or 10.5 or 12.5-inch block, it's going to come out to exactly what you want it to be. So that's what this is, our double square up ruler. Now, this is a half square triangle. I'm going to turn this over. A half square triangle, and it has a seam Carrie, can you see the seam? It's got my 1/4" seam line on here. I didn't do it dark enough. Now what you want to do, you don't have to open this up. In fact, this is the cool thing about this ruler. You're not going to open this up to trim it up. You're only going to have to do 2 cuts. And even if it's just a smidgen that you need to cut off of that, that is very, very important. So you're going to line up your seam line. You're going to line it up across here where the seam line is broken across here. That is where you line your seam up. So on this particular one, I'm going to line it up right here on my, now Carrie's probably going to get a little bit closer here. So I want my seam line to go across this line right here. And then you can see that there's just a smidgen that has to be taken off of here, and even a smaller amount on this side. But that little bit that we cut off can make a whole difference in how your block comes out. When you hold a ruler down, always put your little finger over on this side of the ruler and put your hand here, and you kind of keep that real square so that it doesn't move. So I'm only going to take off just a little bit here, and you can see how little that is. This side I'm going to have to take off a little bit more. Let me go back this way. Okay, so I take off just that smidgen, and then when I do that, I end up with a perfect square that when I open it, now when you press it, because this is a bias edge, when you press it, you make sure, this iron is not on, so I'm not going to ruin my mat. Okay, whoops. Here we go. You're going to press this way. I usually set my seam, press it this way, and then press. Don't keep ironing it across here. You're going to, it's not going to be fun. Then you can take it, because you've got a little bit of dog ears down here, take the other side of the ruler, put it on your block, make sure that it's going to lay just where you want it. And if it's the square that you need, I need to cut off a little bit right there. And I'm going to have a perfect square that I put a half square triangle, and I'll end up with the square that I need. So when I add the next row, you're going to square it up. And so this goes to, this side goes to a 6.5 inch, and I think this one goes to a 4.5 on a triangle. And it's real important just to take those little tiny slivers off. And so you can see, Carrie's going to get down here, you can see that this is just a tiny sliver that I cut off. But that much, when you're only using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, can make a big difference, because it starts out small, and by the time you get to the end of your quilt, you don't have a square quilt. Just, just really cool things. I think we're going to go to our home. Mm-hmm.
Which is,
let's see.
package is right.
Like losing things in your sewing room.
Here is the embroidery for this month. It's called Welcome to Our Home, the Winter Edition by Janine Babbage. And mine is done on an upholstery fabric. It's kind of a velvety surface. It's definitely got a nap to it. And so the swirly stitches that you're going to see on Charlotte's don't show up very much on mine, but that's okay. I just wanted them to be subtle. This fabric is so thick that when it came to sewing it together with the 1/2 inch seam allowance, I decided that was not going to be an option. So my blocks are actually bigger and not matched up with the swirls on hers, which she's going to show you in a minute. I just took these raw edges and butt joined them face down on a wool pressing mat and used iron-on batting tape to hold them together. And then I came back and created this twisted embroidery cord method. Reva has this on a video demo that she did one day. I've been doing this for years. You just take your embroidery floss and you twist it and let it twist back on itself, and it creates this cord, and you can make a custom color This is actually 2 colors of embroidery floss to match this. I just wanted a hint of the seam to show, but not to jump out at you. I did not have enough of this background fabric to do the house, so I skipped that and then finished it up with this binding, and then lucky enough to have this navy blue and silver glitter fabric that looks like I did all this quilting, but I didn't. So again, magic binding, and then I did just a very modest V at the bottom.
Okay.
So
So I'll talk about mine in just a minute, but what I first, I guess I should get over there. I'm going to do a demo on it. And what I did here that is different, some of Janine's patterns, you actually are going to cut this piece, one continuous piece, and she has you multi-hoop it. I did not multi-hoop this. This is like a tiling seam. And so these match up perfectly. We're right in here, but you can't see it. You cannot see that. So I'm going to show you in a moment how I get that to line up and how it's going to be perfect. Now, first of all, it's preparing our fabric. And this is the exact fabric that how I did my fabric. Now on our website, not on the So Fun presentation, I'm going to tell you about a stabilizer that I use, and you're able to purchase that. But I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to use Best Press on my fabric. And when I use Best Press, I'm going to spray the Best Press on the back side of my fabric. Let it soak in, turn it to the right side, and press it. What that does is it brings the starch to the top. And, you know, if you put your iron on that too soon, you'll have all the starch on your iron. So you need to let it soak in, then press it. The next thing that I'm going to put on there, I'm going to use an interfacing because I want to stabilize my fabric. And to stabilize my fabric, I'm going to use Pellon's 911 fusible interfacing, or you can use SF101, whichever one you want. It works really well. The third thing I'm going to put on is one of the products that we carry in our store on our website is Heat and Stay by Floriani Fusible. So everything that's on here is fused on. And then I used my magnetic hoop in my Viking, it's Viking or Pfaff, and it was my 5x7 magnetic hoop. And I laid my fabric just like this, nothing more. I laid it on there and did all of the stitching, and it comes out perfectly flat. Now, what I did here, this is all metallic threads, and all of this squirrely back here is metallic thread. This is all by King Star. And all of my house and my trees, all of this is metallic thread. And I told you already about using the correct needle for that. And I did add a tad more in the pattern. Janine had you kind of make your bottom like Donna did. I wanted mine a little bit longer, so I just made my V just a tad longer, and I used the 987 in this. Now I'm going to show you how I put together my my tile scenes.
the one thing I want to compliment her on in this design is the fact that if you don't notice on the outer package, you get inside, you notice she gives you 2 pronouns, our and my. And so it gives you the ability to make your own or to make one for a friend, depending on their situation.
So it's fun that we did it in both ways.
I really
forgot about that.
Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Okay. So over to the sewing machine. So when you make when you're doing any tile scene, now I've already got all of my fabric stabilized, and I would usually use an open toe foot when I'm doing this. So these are just samples. When I do any embroidery, I like to do a sample first. I want to know how it comes out. So here is Welcome to Our Home that I just did in just regular all embroidery thread, no metallics. And you have this stitch that goes all the way around each block. That's your first stitch. That's an important stitch. And when you get finished with this and you take it, they're going to sit in your hoop like this. When you get finished with this and you cut it, you want to leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance from this stitching line all the way out. This is important because that's where you're going to stitch your next piece together. So here I have 2 pieces. Now this is the back side. So first thing that I do is I will take I will take this, let's do this, yeah, this side. I'm gonna fold this down on that line. So I know, and then I can line it up. Oh, you know what? I need one of these. So I can kind of line this up and see, okay, that's gonna look pretty good. But what I wanna do to actually line those up really, really well is that I'm gonna open this up, and just like we used to do darts, I'm gonna take one of these real fine pins, and I will poke one in this corner here, and in this corner here. Make sure that your pin is going straight down, because you want to have a straight seam across there. I don't take out on my tile seams, I don't take out any of my stabilizer. This is the Floriani's Heat and Stay. I keep that in. Now I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. Put it in the corner and put a little clip in there. I never pin it, because if you pin it, you end up with a little bump, and you don't want any bumps when you're sewing across here. Now, the most important thing about sewing this is that you want to sew. I usually open this up first, so I'll kind of look and I go, okay, that looks like it's going to look pretty well. I'm going to put a basting stitch in here. I'm not going to put my 2.5-inch stitch length. And when I start my sewing, I want to sew it one needle width away from that stitching line. So it's going to be right here. I don't want to sew on top of it, but I want to sew on the bottom, on the left-hand side. So I normally will put my needle down where I see exactly where it's at. And like I say, normally we would use an open toe foot, because you could actually see where you're sewing. And let's see how I'm doing here. Looks pretty good. Now, the reason that I'm going to use a basting stitch is that if I didn't get this exactly right, when I look at the other side, I'm gonna be off. I just moved it, which is not what I wanted to do. And this is a good reason to say why you use a basting stitch. Let's do, where we do this. Oh, shoot, up. There we go. Okay, so I know already I'm off, but the thing that I want to make sure, I started way wrong here, but I can see this stitching line right here, but I can't see it here. So I'm going to turn it over this way, and I'm going to see that I stitched not where I should have. So I can go back over here, and I can turn it around this side, and then I'm going to go down this side, and I will come out perfect. And if I hadn't moved it down there, I should have started at this end. But that way you will get, when you open it up, your end result will be right real close. And when you look at that, when Carrie could, you can see it, there is no stitch line in there. I usually don't go back and take out the stitch line because it's not important, but you can pull out your basting thread, and as soon as I know that it's in there correctly, lined up on both sides perfectly, then I will go over with a 2.5 stitch length, and then when I press it, I'm going to take a seam stick. And I have one that has, I have one's just wooden, or I have one that has the wool on it. And you lay it across your seam stick. And the reason that I'm doing that and using the seam stick is because I don't want to make any indentation with this seam allowance into my project. So doing it with a seam stick, it's like this, and you get this real crisp line with your iron, and let that dry, and you'll come up with a perfect, you can't tell where you sewed it.
So do you want to go show that part? Maybe
yeah.
Show.
So this is sewn right here, right along here, and this is another one. There's another line right here. And I noticed on her thing, one side was a little bit off, so I tried to even it up when I put my binding on. And I just tried, one side was just a little further out, but that was in the design. That is just the way it was. But other than that, you can't tell from any distance that this is not just one continuous piece of fabric. And it had a lot of metallic thread in it, and it was fun. Okay, am I going to do it?
We're going to announce our virtual So Fun winners of the fabric today.
Oh, good. Okay, our first one, and she's going to get this really cool, which is just right for fall, this jelly roll. And the winner is Myra Cohn. And please send us a message with your phone number and the store location you would like to pick it up. Congratulations, this is beautiful.
And then this little fat quarter bundle with some cute little cat fabric is going to Renee Burgess Bolton. And again, send us a message with your phone number and your closest store, and we'll get that to you. So that brings us to the end of our program. I just want to encourage everybody out there listening to us to please come to one of our live presentations.
Absolutely.
They are so much fun. We get so much energy from the people in the audience. Plus, sometimes they give us ideas that we've never even thought of. And so it's a really good time. Look up on the website what store, what time, and just register. Or if you can't register online, call your local store and they will register for you.
Or just come in.
Or
If you-
come in.
You're more than welcome now that we're kind of out of COVID. Just come in.
Yeah.
Come and join us. We have a lot of fun.
We do. I will be back in January with Naomi, and you'll be
May.
coming back in May with me.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
We're kind of joined at the hip.
Yeah, we are.
So anyway,
Thank you for joining us today. We had lots of fun, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. See you next time.